No city in Pontus slept the night the Roman standards appeared on the horizon. From the watchtowers, men saw them first, rows of iron helmets catching the morning light, red cloaks moving like a tide of blood across the plains. They came without haste, without mercy, and without fear. These were not the mercenary bands Pontus had fought before. This was the army of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, veterans of civil war, men who had learned to kill Romans before learning to spare foreigners. Inside the royal city, bells rang in confusion, not celebration. Mothers pulled daughters indoors. Priests sealed temple doors. Courtiers whispered names that tasted like ash. Sulla. Rome. Judgment. For years, Pontus had resisted Roman dominance under King Mithridates VI, a ruler feared as much as he was admired. His court was rich, cultured, and deeply ceremonial. Among its most guarded institutions was a secluded order of royal maidens, young women drawn from noble families, raised within palace compounds and sacred estates. They were symbols of continuity, alliance, and divine favor. Their value was political, cultural, and ritual, not merely personal. To the people of Pontus, these women represented the future. To Sulla's army, they represented something else entirely. When the outer defenses fell, they did not fall in a single thunderous collapse. They were peeled away, gate by gate, tower by tower, with the cold efficiency of men who knew the war was already won. Roman discipline was a blade sharpened by years of bloodshed. No shouting. No rage. Only orders. The city did not burn immediately. That came later. First came the lists. Roman officers moved through conquered quarters with tablets in hand, guided by informants and terrified officials. Names were spoken quietly. Doors were marked. Courtyards were sealed. No screams yet, just the sound of sandals on stone and the rustle of parchment. The royal estates were surrounded before sunrise. Within them, the young women waited. They had been taught obedience, ritual purity, silence. Some believed Roman law would protect them. Others clung to prayer. A few, older and wiser, understood that laws do not survive conquest. When the soldiers entered, they did not behave like raiders. They behaved like collectors. No violence was necessary at first. Resistance was pointless. Families were pushed aside. Guards were disarmed. The women were counted, calmly, carefully, as though they were inventory, not lives. 10,000. That number would follow the army like a shadow. They were marched out in columns under armed escort, past streets where citizens were forbidden to look directly at them. Windows were shuttered. Heads bowed. The silence was worse than screaming. Sulla himself never addressed them. He did not need to. By nightfall, the royal city of Pontus belonged to Rome, and something far older than stone walls had been broken, a covenant between power and protection that had endured for generations. What happened next would never be written in Roman triumph records. The Roman camp outside the city stretched for miles, a temporary empire of leather, iron, and discipline. Fires burned in controlled rows. Standards stood rigid. Order ruled, but beneath that order moved something far darker. The women were not kept together. That was the first cruelty. They were separated by age, by lineage, by perceived value. Roman officers made decisions with the same detachment they used when dividing captured gold or land grants. Some women were assigned to commanders as honors. Others were designated for transport. A number were never recorded again. In Roman military tradition, conquest came with entitlement. Soldiers expected reward. Land, silver, captives, these were the wages of victory. Sulla's army, hardened by years of civil slaughter, had little patience for restraint. Yet this was not chaos. It was administration. Women were redistributed along supply routes, sent westward under guard, absorbed into the machinery of Rome's expansion. Some were forced into domestic servitude in distant villas. Others vanished into urban slave markets under new names, stripped of language, history, and identity. Those who resisted did not die quickly. Pontic customs meant nothing here. Sacred status meant nothing. Royal blood meant nothing. What survived was silence. Roman historians later praised Sulla for restoring order in the East. They wrote of discipline, law, and stability. They did not write about the empty palaces, the sealed temples, or the sudden absence of an entire generation of noblewomen. In Pontus, the damage was immediate and irreversible. Families collapsed. Alliances dissolved. Lineages ended without heirs. Rituals could not be performed. The future, once carefully arranged through marriage and tradition, became a void. And fear became permanent. Long after the Roman legions marched on, people whispered that the land itself had been violated, that something sacred had been taken and never returned. Sulla's army moved west heavier with wealth, lighter with conscience. Rome called it victory. Years later, when Sulla stood in Rome as dictator, he spoke often of enemies defeated and order restored. His supporters praised his strength. His enemies feared his lists. The East was mentioned only in terms of submission and tribute. The women of Pontus were never named. But history has a way of remembering what official records omit. In the ruins of Pontic estates, archaeologists would later find abandoned sanctuaries, unfinished inscriptions, family tombs sealed too early. Local oral traditions spoke of a lost generation, of daughters who left and never returned, of mothers who refused to speak Roman names aloud. Even Rome bore the consequences. Some of those taken east would raise children who knew only fragments of their origins, lullabies without words, customs without meaning. The empire absorbed them, but it could not erase what they represented, proof that conquest does not only destroy cities, it erases futures. Sulla died rich and powerful, convinced of his legacy. Pontus survived, but it was never whole again. The tragedy of the 10,000 royal virgins was not a single moment of violence, it was a slow extinction. Of identity. Of lineage. Of protection. And perhaps that is why Roman history remained silent. Because some victories are so complete, they leave no one alive to record the truth.